All right, I'm gonna mute then so y'all
Okay,
can talk.
guys. Good morning. I'm going to do a little quick session. Good morning, Mindy. Good morning, Marie. On the rental world. I may end up doing this another time, but at the least, we're going to have a recording of this. Okay. Let's talk first on helping a tenant. Okay. So as many of us know, hopefully all of us should know, as we are licensed real estate agents, we are able to help obviously sellers sell and buyers buy, but we're also able to help tenants rent, right? The properties that are that really the database that we generally go to find the available rentals is FMLS, okay? And there's a rental heading, residential lease rather than residential sale. Okay. We search for properties basically the exact same way, right? Size, price, age. Do they allow pets or no pets? Are they in a gated community or swim and tennis or, multi-story, one-story, fenced yard, all that kind of stuff. We search exactly the same way. And we find properties that are privately owned. So that's privately owned condos, townhomes, and single family properties that the owner has hired a real estate broker to market and sell. Okay. Now we set appointments the exact same way according to their showing instructions, and we go see the properties the exact same way. Okay. The one thing that is going to be different for basically every single scenario is the application process, right? What is the process in which the owner and their agent are planning to screen clients? So there's a lot of variety here. Sometimes we see um, uh, application fees anywhere from about $25 on the low end to I've seen them as high as $75 on the high end. Most of the time they're in the $40 to $50 neighborhood. More often than not, they're going to screen every adult, whether they provide income or not, right? And more often than not, the things they're checking for are um, to make sure they're not a um, sex offender, or let me rephrase that, to make sure they're aware of whether they're a sex offender or not. Okay. To determine if they have pets, to determine if they have a appropriate rental history, right? If they have always been late or credit scores and that kind of stuff, landlord referrals. They want to generally make sure this is not a steadfast rule, but what you see most often is that the owner is going to want to make sure that the tenant can pay the rent. The way that they determine that is they evaluate what is the rent and what is the family income, or what is the sum of all the incomes of all the adults that are in the home. Okay. And they generally will look for a minimum of 3 times the monthly rent. So, for example, if the rent is $2,000, let's say, they want to make sure that the family that's living there, the group of people or whatever it is that's living there, make it at least $6,000 total. Okay. With pretty standard credit score, the expectation is that the tenants will provide 1 month of security deposit. With poor credit score, um, or things like foreclosure, bankruptcy, short sales, these kind of things where you've had you know uh, issues in the past, then the owner is able just to say, I'm not willing to accept that. Or oftentimes, if they do accept it, they'll accept it with a little bit more security deposit. So sometimes in those types of situations, you might see 2 months of security deposit rather than 1 month. Okay. Generally speaking, when the day the lease is signed, they will pay what I've called a reservation fee, which is essentially a month's rent payment, and that holds the home for them until they move in. At move in, that money converts to the security deposit, and then they bring the first month's rent. So generally speaking, with great credit, they can expect to pay a first month's rent, a security deposit. With poor credit, probably 2 security deposits. Okay. They should also be prepared to pay the application fee, of course, as well as any pet fees. Some pet fees are refundable, some are not refundable. I've seen them as low as $200. I've seen them as high as $1,000 before. Okay. When somebody tells you they have pets, you just want to check in to see what kind of pets they have, right? If somebody says, I got 6 pit bulls and I want to, you know, I want to rent a place, I'd probably pass on that. Okay. There's certain breeds of dogs, aggressive breeds, that owners may not want to consider, and insurance companies may not want to consider. So we got to look into that with a good amount of detail if those types of breeds pop up. Okay. Um, Generally, the fee for helping a tenant find a place is a portion of the first month's rent. More often than not, I see that around 25 to 30% of the first month's rent. So you're not gonna, you're not like going to Tahiti because you helped a renter probably. The purpose though is obviously somebody needs help and we provide help. And it's a great way to build the database and to build relationships, right? Whenever somebody rents a home, obviously I want to make note of when that lease expires so that I can keep my eye on that deadline, and I'm communicating with them as that deadline approaches to find out if they plan to move again or rent again or certainly purchase, okay? And I treat them just like a regular client with the touch campaigns and the phone calls and texts and the handwritten notes and all that kind of stuff, okay? Whether my paycheck is big or small, they get the same level of service. Make sense? Okay, let's talk about landlords for a second. Landlords. The first question you want to ask a landlord when they are considering renting or hiring you to find a tenant is, do you plan to manage the home yourself? Right. If they plan to manage the home themselves, then they have to be the ones to select what kind of screening mechanisms they use to screen the client. And there's a website that I usually recommend called mysmartmove.com. mysmartmove.com. It's a free site for landlords. They do charge an application fee, obviously, to screen the person, and that fee is generally passed on to the tenant. Okay. That is a great system for collecting the application for the tenant. Problem is that only does a couple things. So it does a sex registry check, it does a felony check, and it does a credit score. And based on the risk tolerances that you've established, it makes a recommendation. What it doesn't assess is the person's income or their reference history or their references. Okay, so what I like to do is have them fill out the GAR form, just a Georgia Association of Realtors rental application, and include a copy of their driver's license and a copy of their most recent pay stubs. If they don't have pay stubs, show me that you make money, right? Whether it's incoming deposits that happen repetitively into your bank account, if it's tax returns, prove to me that you make enough money to pay for this place, whatever that means, okay? And then we combine that with the report that is generated from the MySmartMove, and ultimately the landlords makes a decision on whether they want to accept this client. If they accept the client, then you generally will write the lease or fill in the blanks for the lease. That's a GAR form as well. And just like I described a few minutes ago, once the lease is signed, there's usually a deposit that's paid, and that converts to the security deposit at move-in. Now, you're being hired to market and sell or list the market and lease the property, which means that all the things that you would normally do, from putting the listing in the system and taking professional pictures and putting a lockbox on the door and signing all that, nothing changes there. Okay, generally the fee is a 1 month's rent payment. So again, you're not making a killing on this. Let's say you make $2,000 and you spend $200 on a photographer, and you got to give 25 or 30% to the person who brings the tenant. Okay, so again, there's not a huge amount of money here, but you are creating a relationship and you're proving your value. And more than likely, you're going to get a lot of sign calls, meaning you're going to get a lot of inquiries. Hey, tell me about this home. Hey, I don't have an agent. Hey, will you show me the home, right? And these are all people that you can build relationships with over time. The other option, of course, is if the landlord chooses to work with a property management company, meaning they've decided, hey, this is not a job I want to take on. I want to hire a professional management company. Okay. If that's the case, obviously it goes without saying that you need to determine which management company you want to work with or make a recommendation. I've used the one that I've used most often in my career is called All County North Metro. All County North Metro. Woman named Lori Toyer. We've been friends for probably 15 years, and she's done a lot of properties for me over time. We had an agreement basically that, or let me back up. Generally, when a property management company is connected, in some instances, they just hire the property management company to do everything, to take the pictures, to market the property, to field the inquiries, to make the showings, to screen the client, to write the lease, everything. Okay. What I wanted was, yes, the property manager to do their part, but I wanted the sign calls, right? So I wanted to prove my value. So I wanted to be the one to pay for pictures and stick my sign in the yard and receive all the inquiries. Because the management company, they're not really in the business of helping a bunch of tenants find places, but I was in the business of growing my database. So I wanted that job. So I negotiated a deal with the property management company to, normally they would get the first month's rent and then an ongoing monthly management fee. When we worked together, they agreed to give me the first month's rent. And then they, once the person said, hey, I want to apply, we used their screening mechanisms. They wrote the lease, they handled the move-in, and they then took the ongoing management fee. And then I got the first month's rent, and I had to, pay the other agent, of course, if there was one. If there wasn't one, I got the whole thing. Okay. So you want to, as a representative of a landlord, you want to ask the questions that are, right. Do you want to manage it yourself? Right. If not, do you have a relationship with somebody, or would you like me to help you with that? That would be one thing. And then the other questions, of course, would be things like, do you want to accept pets? Right? How do you feel about people smoking in the home? Like these kind of things, right? And that will help you basically create the rules for that the tenant would have to abide by in order to move, to move in. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes.
And then we would list the property as a listing agent. We'd list the property on the MLSs just like we would normally. Okay. So really nothing changes in terms of presentation, right? Lockbox, sign, photos, all that. And the other thing you need to have in mind is showings or access, right? So for example, if you've got a tenant in the place now whose lease is about to expire, and they're still there, right? And you're trying to find the next group of people, then you need to, as we know, the nicer you are and the easier you make it for everybody, the more cooperative that they'll be, right? So you might say, hey, I'll give you 24 hours notice, and then I'm going to ask that somebody get the opportunity to come in and see the home. Make sense? Okay, so that's a pretty good quick overview. That, I mean, it's real fast, but was that clear? Was that helpful?
It was very helpful. I didn't know some of those things, so that was good to know, because then I can take on some renters.
Okay, beautiful. So let me hit the stop button, and we will make that recording official.